As fighting rages between Israeli forces and Hamas in Gaza, concern has been growing that the conflict may soon spread. In particular, there are fears that Hezbollah, based in neighbouring Lebanon, may be about to enter the war, opening a second northern front. If so, this would mark a dramatic escalation of the conflict. But while both sides would seem keen to take on the other, they also know that it would come with profound and perhaps disastrous repercussions. So, just how likely is a war between Israel and Hezbollah, and why would it be so dangerous for them both? Hello and welcome. If you're new to the channel, my name is James Ker-Lindsay, and here I take an informed look at international relations, conflict, security and statehood. We tend to think of conflicts in terms of two broad categories. On the one hand, there are interstate wars. These are fought between sovereign independent countries. On the other hand, we have civil wars, usually involving a state and an internal rebel group. However, sometimes a conflict emerges between a state and a significant external non-state actor. One of the most prominent examples in the contemporary international system is the long-standing confrontation between Israel and Hezbollah. Over several decades, and with Iranian support, Hezbollah has become a dominant actor in neighbouring Lebanon. Lebanon lies at the far eastern end of the Mediterranean. To its south is Israel, and to its north and east it borders Syria. At 10,500 square kilometres or 4,000 square miles, it's the world's 161st largest country. Its population currently stands at around 5.6 million. This comprises a complex range of ethno-national, linguistic and religious communities. While the exact numbers are unclear, Maronite Christians were traditionally the largest single group, followed by Muslim Sunni and Muslim Shiite communities. In addition, there are numerous smaller groups. These include Armenians, Assyrians, Druze, Christian Orthodox and Protestants. Finally, and crucially, it also has a large Palestinian community, the product of decades of conflict to Lebanon's south. And it's this complex demography that helps to explain the rise of Hezbollah. But to understand just how it emerged, we need to look back at the development of the modern Middle East. Our story starts with the emergence of Israel in 1948, following the decision to partition British-controlled Palestine, creating separate homelands for the Arab Palestinians and the region's Jewish population. The Palestinians joined forces with neighbouring Arab countries, including Lebanon, to destroy the new Israeli state. However, the attack failed, and as Israel seized control of most of the areas designated for a Palestinian state, hundreds of thousands of Palestinians fled. While many moved to the West Bank and Gaza, Palestinian territories that now came under Jordanian and Egyptian control, many took refuge in neighbouring countries, including Lebanon. Over the decades that followed, the Palestinians, brought together in 1964 under the umbrella of the Palestinian Liberation Organization, the PLO, continued their campaign against Israel. As well as using Gaza and the West Bank to launch their attacks, they also operated from bases in Syria, Jordan, Egypt and Lebanon. This came to a head in 1967 when another war broke out. Once again, Israeli forces defeated the Arab armies, this time occupying Gaza and the West Bank. And as a result, an estimated 40,000 Palestinian forces now fled to Jordan. However, this soon led to tensions, and in September 1970, the Jordanian army forcibly expelled the PLO, which now made its way to Lebanon. Coming on top of the tens of thousands of Palestinians who'd arrived in the country in 1948, this influx of well-armed fighters would significantly affect the country's delicate intercommunal situation, which had seen political power balanced between the three predominant religious groups, the Christian Maronites, the Sunni Muslims and the Shia Muslims, with Palestinians now representing anywhere between 10 to 15% of the population. They began allying with various groups challenging Maronite Christian dominance. This all came to a head in 1975. As fighting broke out between the Christians and the Palestinians, Lebanon quickly descended into what would become a ferocious and extremely complex civil war, pitting Christians, Palestinians, Sunnis, Druze and Shias against each other. On top of this, the conflict eventually drew in many other outside actors, and it's at this point that the next crucial element comes into play. In January 1979, a revolution overthrew the pro-Western monarchy in Iran, bringing to power a new theocratic Shia regime. In addition to being fiercely opposed to Israel and supporting the Palestinian cause, the new government in Tehran also saw itself as the protector of Shiite populations across the Middle East, including the large community in Lebanon. This would all come together in June 1982. Following increasing attacks by Palestinian forces, Israel invaded Lebanon. As well as seizing much of the Shia-inhabited south of the country, this also led to a massacre of Palestinian refugees. And it was at this point that Iran entered the conflict. Sending over 1,000 members of its Revolutionary Guard to Lebanon, it played a crucial role in the emergence of a new Shiite militia, the Army of God, otherwise known as Hezbollah. Over the next few years, Hezbollah steadily grew in strength and influence. As well as waging an insurgency against Israeli forces and their local Christian ally, the South Lebanese Army, it also began to push aside the more established Shia militia, the Amal movement. In 1989, after almost a decade and a half of fighting, the Lebanese civil war ended when the sides reached a peace agreement. But while this new power-sharing agreement called for the militias to disband and give up their arms, Hezbollah remained intact as a fighting force. Although it would develop a political wing and go on to win seats in the Lebanese parliament, it also kept up its attacks against Israeli troops in the south. On top of this, it also began to focus on Israeli and Jewish targets abroad. This came to international attention when it staged 2 attacks in Argentina in 1992 and 1994 that left over 100 dead. And as a result, the United States designated Hezbollah as a terrorist organisation in 1997. But even after Israel eventually withdrew its forces from southern Lebanon in 2000, Hezbollah kept up its attacks, launching frequent missile and artillery strikes across the border. This would all come to a head in July 2006 when Hezbollah launched a rocket attack on northern Israel and staged a raid into the country, capturing 2 Israeli soldiers. In response, Israel sent its forces back into Lebanon, sparking a major month-long conflict. In the end, the flare-up in fighting came to a halt when the UN Security Council called for the disbandment of Hezbollah, the withdrawal of Israeli defence forces from southern Lebanon, and an enhanced UN peacekeeping presence in the country. Over the following years, it appeared as if the situation had calmed down. While skirmishes with Israel continued and the group remained implacably opposed to Israel's existence, there were no further significant confrontations. However, rather than fade away, Hezbollah steadily became more powerful. For a start, it became heavily involved in the Syrian civil war. As well as propping up the Assad regime, its fighters became battle-hardened, fighting against Islamic State, ISIS. Moreover, it continued to be implicated in terrorist attacks elsewhere. This included an attack on Israeli tourists in Bulgaria in 2012 that saw the European Union designate the organisation's military wing as a terrorist organisation. All this means that today the group remains a formidable fighting force. Estimates suggest that it has as many as 25,000 regular troops and maybe another 30,000 reservists, if not more. On top of this, with continued Iranian financial and military support, it's continued to build up its arms. Indeed, many believe that it now has a large arsenal of land, sea and air weapons, including over 100,000 rockets. Meanwhile, within Lebanon, its position has also gone from strength to strength, with the central government unable to carry out many of the daily functions of administration. Hezbollah provides essential services in many areas, including healthcare and education. This has led many to refer to Hezbollah as a state within a state. It's against this backdrop that the October 2023 Hamas attack on Israel and Israel's overwhelming response immediately sparked fears that Hezbollah would use the opportunity to open a new war with Israel. But despite the initial predictions and leaving aside the speculation about Hezbollah's role in planning Hamas's October attack, the first signs suggested that the group in fact wanted to keep a cautious distance. Indeed, it took almost a month before the group's leader, Syed Hasan Nasrallah, gave his first speech on Gaza. While he wholeheartedly supported Hamas, he indicated that the matter was essentially a Palestinian issue and Hezbollah would not become actively involved. A stance that came as a disappointment to many Palestinians who were unhappy with Hezbollah's lukewarm attitude. Even on the ground, there appears to be caution. While Hezbollah has certainly seized on the fighting in Gaza to step up its attacks on northern Israel, these appear to be carefully staged. While it has launched rockets against civilian areas, its attacks seem to have been focused primarily on military targets. Likewise, Israel also appears keen to keep things in check. Although it has retaliated against Hezbollah strikes, and reports suggest that it's killed up to 100 Hezbollah militants, so far it hasn't responded in a large-scale or indiscriminate way as it has in Gaza. And while it has issued warnings that it could take the war to Beirut if Hezbollah steps up its attacks, this also seems more like a statement of deterrence than intent at this stage. All this would seem to indicate that both sides are in fact trying to keep the conflict in check, at least for now. So, could a full-scale war eventually emerge? Of course, it's extremely difficult to say. Notwithstanding the current caution, both sides would undoubtedly relish the opportunity to strike at the other. For Israel, Hezbollah is a much more significant and far more organised threat than Hamas. Likewise, Hezbollah would almost certainly like the chance to step up its conflict with Israel, especially as many will believe that its old foe is not the fighting force that many once thought it was. However, both sides will also be acutely aware of the enormous dangers of an all-out war. While the Hamas attack has undoubtedly undermined the myth of Israeli military prowess, the IDF remains a formidable fighting force. Similarly, Israel knows that Hezbollah is a significant organisation with a vast arsenal of rockets and artillery. A full-scale war could force the evacuation of large parts of northern Israel. But it's the broader international dimensions of any conflict that will almost certainly be concentrating minds on both sides. For Hezbollah, the presence of 2 US aircraft carrier groups in the eastern Mediterranean will be a significant source of concern. In the event of a full-scale conflict, Hezbollah could face a devastating response from the United States, especially if it launched large-scale attacks on Israeli civilian areas. Meanwhile, many in Israel, as well as the United States and Europe, will be concerned about possible direct Iranian involvement if events escalated, a situation that could have unexpected and dangerous consequences not just in the Middle East, but beyond. But even in Iran, the US factor weighs large. Already, senior Iranian officials have warned about the potentially catastrophic consequence of drawing the United States into any conflict. For all these reasons, it seems likely that both sides, Israel and Hezbollah, as well as their respective supporters, will want to continue to keep the conflict simmering but not boiling over. The trouble, of course, is that these situations can rapidly spiral out of control. I hope you found that useful. If so, here's another video that you might find helpful. Thanks so much for watching, and see you in the next video.